Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Wrestling the Territories podcast. And welcome back to another episode. We're going to be talking about Ron Garvin a little bit tonight. And we're going to go back in time and relive the time he became the world champion. We're going to see how that led up to that. And what I want to do is take us back to 1985 real quick. So this whole thing with Ron Garvin becoming the world champion kind of goes back to the time when he was facing off against the Midnight Express in 1985. That did lead to 1987's big feud with him and Barry Windham versus the Midnight Express that launched Ron Garvin in becoming the world champion. Now, he became the champion, but I think the search for the title was better than the run itself. But we'll get into that too. But so you go back to 1985, and in 1985, Ron Garvin is teaming with Jimmy Boogie Woogie Man Valiant against the Midnight Express with Jim Cornette. And it's not, is it really Ron Garvin? Let's just find that out a little bit. So here's what it was. If you go look at this picture here. So there you go. So this here is Ron Garvin in the red. Uh, well, he's in drag basically, and so he's um he's Miss Helena Lively. That's his name. And so these two absolutely drive the Midnight Express insane. He comes out, he's dressed like this, knocks Cornette, anybody, Midnight Express down and all that, and drives them absolutely insane. This ends up leading to Starcade, and at Starcade, it's a street fight, and we'll get into that. So I'm not going to be able to bring you I'm not going to be able to do videos on here. So we'll do audios from time to time, but I will say that the matchup between these two tag teams was pretty cool. It ends up being that Ron Garvin, Miss Atlanta Lively, and Jimmy Valiant does win the match. But this is kind of like uh, an early start to a Midnight Express feud with Ron Garvin in a way, because it would be later on that he would face off against Big Bubba Rogers in Starrcade '86. Now, later on, Ron Garvin becomes the Mid Atlantic champion, as you can see here in this picture. He's a Mid Atlantic champion in 1986. So he defeats, I believe, is Black Bart, and to hold the Mid Atlantic Championship title. And during this process, Ivan Koloff and Crusher Khrushchev is the United States Tag Team Champions. So the story I've heard and read and listened to interviews about, Crusher Khrushchev was done with the NWA. He was kind of fed up with them and was ready to leave. So they decided to drop the belts, and the NWA decides to give it to Ron Garvin and Barry Windham. At the same time, Ron Garvin is still the Mid Atlantic Heavyweight Champion, so he has to end up giving the Mid Atlantic title away. Okay, so here's a picture of those two with the United States Tag Team belts. Those are nice belts. Actually, I own a replica of those belts. I've always liked those. But let's listen to the ending of that match and how they became the United States Tag Team Champions.
They throw Wyndham through the ropes. Now they've got Garvin in by himself. Here comes the chains into play. And just as we said, Johnny, we very well could have new champions. The crowd goes wild, and we do. Ronnie Garvin, Barry Windham, the new United States Tag Team Champions. Watch this right here in slow motion, fans. Khrushchev goes over. He's really going to lower the boom with a chain. And here's where Wyndham pins it.
And so, like I said, I can't do the videos, but audio we'll listen to as much of it possibly can. So, at that point in time, he gives up the Mid Atlantic Championship after their victory, and that's the last time you ever see the Mid Atlantic Championship belt. They said in the NWA, Jim Crockett said they was going to have a tournament, but they never did. They just relinquished the championship and set it off to the side. So these two becoming U.S. Tag Team Champions kind of catapult both of them up some because Barry Windham would then start a feud with Ric Flair as well and chase the world title early in 1987. The Crockett Cup, he has a championship title shot. And although Barry does not ever become the world champion, it really catapulted him. So what happens with Ron Garvin is they decide to put him kind of in this whole Midnight Express situation to where what happens is uh, the title shots back and forth with Bobby Eaton and Dennis Condrey. For now, Dennis Condrey ends up moving on, and we have Stan Lane that will come in. But in that time frame, there's it's Condrey and Eaton who's chasing the United States Tag Team titles. So then what happens is they do have a match, and something unbelievable happens. So in his time frame of becoming U.S. Tag Team Champions, I was saying that it puts both Ron and Barry into a unique situation. And it ends up being that both are chasing a world title eventually in 87. But with the Midnight Express, Jim Cornette just harbors a lot of hatred towards Ron Garvin, going back to 85 with the Miss Atlanta Lively thing. And I think at this point in time, Jim Cornette thinks, well, we're taking advantage of something here. And so what happens is something that you would thought you'd never see on TV, especially syndication TV. And so what you're about to see in the picture and listen to the audio is kind of shocking if you've never heard tell this before, this story. So we're going to pick this up towards the end of the match.
Taking advantage of every situation, and Midnight Express are not losing one situation here. Cornette on his way over here again. All right.
The referee was all the way across the ring. How can we pin the man when he ain't there to count?
Cornette complaining about the referee not counting. Dennis looked like he was trying to get Windham up for the suplex. He can't get it up, and there goes Dennis. He did! Suplex! Both men down! Both men are out of there! What is that? Barry doesn't know which corner to go to. Both men down! Holy cow! He got it! Barry Windham just closed in the corner for the tag. Ronnie Garvin. And Garvin, who is completely fresh, look at him go to work. Oh, right hand! Here he comes! Here comes that right hand! Ronnie Garvin makes it right baby! He got him! Saved by Beautiful Bobby! Beautiful Bobby just in time! Off guard the ring! Garvin is down! Here's Big Bubba! Bubba now drags Bobby out of the ring. He's dragging Windham out of the ring. Cornette's in the ring. What is Cornette doing? What's Cornette doing? Oh my God! Something flame in the eyes and in the face of Garvin. The referee said, ring it down. Look at Garvin staggering, reeling, and rolling around the ring in tremendous pain. No, wait, here they come to get the belt. Jim Cornette. What was that? Ronnie Garvin down a bunch of guys in. Rock and roll stuff. Just a huge ball of flame by Cornette right in the face of Ronnie Garvin. I have never seen anything like that. I don't know what Cornette did, but all of a sudden there was a ball of fire right in the face of Ronnie Garvin, and he's just withering him in pain down in the ring now. Well, we saw Cornette in the ring. We couldn't understand what he was doing. He was fumbling around with something. Ronnie got up groggy. Here's Tim Hunter, and here's Jimmy Garvin. Jimmy Garvin in the ring. Jimmy Garvin. What's he doing? Yes, gorgeous. Jimmy comes in. He's got a towel now around the face of Garvin. Precious is in there. Precious is in. They're trying. Jimmy Garvin trying to lead Ronnie Garvin out. Precious showing him the way. Let's see if they go down. It's gorgeous. Jimmy Garvin in. Precious right behind him. They're leading him down. The arrow looks like toward the dressing room. Cameraman with him. Maybe we can stay with it. There's the Rock and Roll Express. Ronnie Garvin with a face face full of fire there. Jimmy Garvin in. They're going down the dressing room, trying to get Ronnie to some help, some attention. My goodness, Bob, a ball of fire right in his face. And it caught him right full in the face. Complete surprise. He turned around, and there was Cornette. No way he had any idea something like that was coming. Look, he's collapsed on him.
Okay, so they take him back to the locker room and keep him down. He's laying on the ground, and this really angers Jimmy Garvin, who is kayfabe Ronnie Garvin's brother. Actually, it's Ron Garvin's stepson. Jim Garvin is Ron Garvin's stepson, but it's the kayfabe is that's his brother, and this is where Jimmy Garvin becomes a good guy, a face, and it turns and goes after the Midnight Express, as you'll hear in this audio as it continues.
Florida dressing room. And look at there is still gorgeous Jimmy Garvin all over Ronnie Garvin. And he goes charging out of one. He's going to charge across the way to the other dressing room. Oh, he busted the other dressing room. He's on Cornette. He's got Cornette in the middle of the floor. Jimmy Garvin on top of Cornette. They're trying to drag him off. There's bedlam in the other dressing room, Bob. Jimmy Garvin is went nuts. Come on, Jimmy. Completely wild, man. It's gorgeous Jimmy Garvin. He went from one dressing room when he looked at Ronnie Garvin again down on the floor in that dressing room. He went charging away.
So then they take Ron out to the car, and Precious and Jimmy Garvin take him to the hospital. There is an interview that Jimmy Garvin has talking about him being Ron Garvin's brother, and how he's going to get back at the Midnight Express and Bubba and all of them for what happened to Ron Garvin. So this kind of sets up a pretty cool feud with the Midnight Express and Ron Garvin, Barry Windham for a bit, because they still go back and forth even after Ron Garvin recovers. So as the U.S. Tag Team Champions, they do make the comeback, but there is a little snag there because Ivan Koloff and Dick Murdoch become the U.S. Tag Team Champions. But it's only for a short period of time, as Dick Murdoch is actually suspended by the NWA for doing a brainbuster on Nikita Koloff and injuring Nikita Koloff's neck. So they have a tournament for the U.S. Tag Team Championships, which ends up being Barry Windham, Ron Garvin versus the Midnight Express. This time, Dennis Condrey is no longer with him. He just up and left the NWA. Stories I've heard, he was just done with them. Um, but the one thing that Dennis Condrey does say, which is kind of funny, and let me see, I'll play this audio. It's absolutely funny thing that Dennis Condrey. Okay, I could not find the interview. I could not find that clip, but it's funny because they suspend Jim Cornette for the fireball incident, right? Dennis Condrey gets upset because they have fine to pay and all this stuff, and Dennis Condrey says that he could Cornette couldn't help it that Ron Garvin got hit by a cosmic fireball. If I could ever find that audio, it'd be great. I don't know where that's at, but anyway, it is funny how he says it, and it goes on. But quickly after that happens, though, Dennis Condrey decides to leave the NWA, so it kind of leaves Bobby Eaton by himself with Big Bubba for a bit, and then they bring in Stan Lane to take over Dennis Condrey's spot. So in that tournament that ends up being the Midnight Express, Ron Garvin and Barry Windham finals for the U.S. Tag Team titles, uh, it becomes a situation where I believe it was a chair shot that took down Ron Garvin, and the Midnight Express wins the U.S. Tag Team belts in that tournament. So then that kind of switches the attention from the Midnight Express for Ron Garvin and Barry Windham to now Ric Flair is trying to go after Precious, which is Jim Garvin's wife, and that involves Ron Garvin as well. Ron Garvin uh, sits back as his brother goes after the world title and goes into a cage match with Ric Flair. Jim Garvin loses, which ends up supposedly giving Precious Ric Flair for the night, those two having a night out, so to speak. So they go to the hotel room, and Ron Garvin is dressed in drag again, knocks out Ric Flair, and it starts this whole feud with Ric Flair and Ron Garvin. And the chase for the world title for Ron Garvin is absolutely cool. He does, everything he can do to get the crowd behind him. He does great. The lead up is wonderful, but the thing is, he becomes a world heavyweight champion. And when he does become the world champion, that's kind of when it goes downhill for him. Okay, so now we're going to join that match at towards the end, where Ron Garvin becomes the world heavyweight champion.
Puts on the ropes. Lands the head, throws him into the fence. He catches him, turns him around, chops him again. Oh, look at it, no! Now go, Garvin coming right back, taking everything Rick can give up. Again and again. Throws him across, comes in, back up. Rick goes up, looks around, trying to figure a way to escape. Starts to climb up. Garvin goes right after him. Takes his right on top of the fence. Rick straddles the rope and down. Garvin up. Look at him. Up on the top rope. Here he comes. Sunset flip. 2, 3. He did it. He did it. Ron Garvin. He did it. Ron Garvin has just won the World Heavyweight Championship. Ladies and gentlemen.
So he wins the world championship there in a sunset flip from the top rope on the Ric Flair and pins him 1, 2, 3. So there is an interview that they have after the match. So I'll play that.
World Heavyweight Champion, Ron Garvin. Ron Garvin, the new World Heavyweight Champion. You did it. You said you were going to do it. You finally won the World Heavyweight Championship. Well, congratulations. I was hurting, but I got no more pain, brother. This is the greatest feeling of my life. This is better than getting married or having babies or getting $1 million. This is the best thrill of my life. I have goosebumps, butterflies. My legs are weak. Ladies and gentlemen, again, the new World Heavyweight Champion, Ron Garvin.
So he becomes world champion. The interview, he says it's better than getting married and having babies. Um, God. Anyway, in the ring at that time was Dusty Rhodes, Rock and Roll Express, Michael Hayes, Shane Douglas, I believe I saw, Nikita Koloff, and others that came in to celebrate the world title victory with Ron Garvin. So, Ron Garvin now the world champion. So, this little story we started back in 1985 is almost coming to an end. So, Ron Garvin is a champion. This is around, I believe it's like I want to say, I don't remember the exact date. I want to say it's like September, I believe, is when he became the world champion. He loses it on Thanksgiving night in November of that year. So only a couple of months he's a champion. He never defends the title. You see him in interviews on UWF as well as called Pro and Worldwide and Saturday Night. He does have some matches. I believe he does have one against Arn Anderson, but he never defends the title. He never gets a name plaque for the title either. And so again, he's just a transition champion, as they call it. And Ron Garvin does say in interviews it's kind of like a trinket for him. It's not a very big deal for him to win the world title, I guess, but it was a big deal to a lot of fans back in the day. The lead up to it, like I said, was good. Him going from you go back to '85 with the Midnight Express feud, and then going all the way into '87, off and on. That leads Ron Garvin to become the world champion. A lot of the stories I've heard behind that is basically because Magnum TA got injured and wasn't able to compete against Flair in '86. And so Nikita, so they'd had some things. I mean, Dusty Rhodes had challenged for the title many times. Ricky Morton had, but wasn't willing to, uh, you know, give up his tag team partner Robert Gibson to be a champion, or else they would have probably put the title on Ricky Morton in '86. But so you had Dusty several times. You had Ricky Morton. You now had Nikita Koloff twice. You had him in '85 with Ric Flair. We'll cover that one day. But you also have Nikita as a good guy and Flair as a heel this time around in '86. So Flair's been the champion for since the summer of '86. So they were ready to take the belt off of him. Ron Garvin was the one that they decided to put on it. And like I say, fans just couldn't get behind him. Now he won the title in Michigan and lost it in Chicago. And those are not Mid Atlantic territories. That's not Jim Crockett territories, real well known for as well. But it's the problem is if he'd have won it in, let's say, Georgia and lost it in Greensboro, it might have been more of a fanfare of hate towards Flair. But it was Garvin lost the title in Stark '87 in Chicago, and a lot of fans were cheering. I mean, a lot of fans were cheering. So the venue wasn't the best venue for them. They end up having to go against also Survivor Series, and it's one of those things where Vince McMahon told companies, cable companies, if you carry Starrcade, you cannot carry WrestleMania. It was uncalled for what he did there. He should have never done that. That's not right. But at any rate, uh, the run for Ron Garvin is what I'm trying to get at. It was not that good. Just a couple of months. It didn't last long, and he didn't have any title defenses. And mostly he did interviews with some few matches against jobbers and people like Arn Anderson, who's not a jobber, by the way. But again, he didn't have a lot of competition to go after the title, and it ended up being they put the belt back on Flair. And Flair holds it until Ricky Steamboat takes it off of him in '89. So, and that's a much better story of somebody becoming a champion. And I hate it for Ron Garvin though, because I was always a Ron Garvin fan. I always thought he was good, but just him becoming the champion was not as well as received as most people thought it could have been. But anyway, so that's the story of Ron Garvin and how Ron Garvin went from Miss Atlanta Lively to the NWA World Heavyweight Champion. And what a story that was. I know this ain't a very long podcast, but it's one of those short and sweet stories I like to bring out there. And I hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, God bless. We'll see you soon.